Harmony of the Gospels is not going to be a quick study. This just ended between the Testaments, if I counted right, and I didn't spend a lot of time, we spent 9 weeks on it. Technically now we've just spent 9.5. This is not the time frame for the harmony of the Gospels. It's going to be a long time because there are 180 episodes. So while it won't be quick, it will be incredibly rich because we get to talk about all of the literally all of the things that Jesus did and said. It's just going to seem like forever. That's not my fault. He's the one who did it all and said it all. I'm just the one that's got to stand up here and talk about it. So hopefully it won't be so overburdensome for us. We will try to do it as quickly as we can. But let's begin with just a simple timeline of the Gospels. And I will explain, this was meant to be on a smaller screen, but everyone was much, much closer. So over here in 37 BC, Herod the Great begins his rule. In 27, Augustus becomes the Roman emperor. Then in 20, Herod begins the construction of the temple. 20 BC. 20 BC. They bring it up when Jesus cleanses the temple. And he's already a what by then? He's an adult, like years into adulthood when he cleanses the temple. Okay, Annas becomes high priest in AD 6. So Annas ends up becoming high priest right around the time that Jesus very well could have been born. I've got 6 or 5 BC. That's sort of the consensus. I saw one person who put it as late as 7, but guys, it's got to be 7, 6, 5 BC. It's got to be somewhere in there. Jesus is born. By the way, we know when he died. I mean, we can put it to the day when he died. I don't know when he was born. Does that say anything? Does that say anything? What does that say? It's just not as what? It's not as important. And I don't, when people talk to us about Easter and about Christmas, I always tell them it's not that Christmas is unimportant. It's not that the day that Jesus was born is unimportant. It's just not what God wanted us to what? To celebrate. It's not what God wanted us to commemorate. And I can only commemorate. If I want to do the will of God, I can only commemorate what He tells me to commemorate. It's not that it wasn't an important, necessary day, clearly. And by us not doing special things on Christmas, I do not mean to send the message that I don't care when He was born. As we're going to see in the accounts in Luke 1 and Luke 2, the messages from the angels, from God, say it's a great day. It's a blessed day. It's just not the day that the Lord wanted us to commemorate. So in 5 or 4, here's the escape to Egypt. Herod the Great dies in 4. Jesus' family returns to Nazareth in somewhere around 4 to 3. Then we have the changeover between BC and AD. Judea becomes a Roman province in 6 AD. Tiberius becomes Roman emperor in 14 AD. Why is that important? Tiberius becoming a Roman emperor in 14. Why is that important? Because Luke states when he started his, we call it a personal ministry. I'll call it that because I don't know anything else to call it. Jesus started his personal ministry, and it's dated when? From this man, from Tiberius. That's why it's important. Caiaphas becomes high priest in 18. Pontius Pilate is appointed governor of Judea in 26. Jesus begins his ministry somewhere around 26 or 27, but even that could be a hair late. Could could have been 25 or 20, so we just don't know. And then in 30, the crucifixion, the resurrection, and the ascension of Jesus. Okay, so the big question, why do you need to write the Gospels? So why did the Gospels need to be written? So just first and foremost, the Gospels are called because of what reason? Because of good news. This is the salvation that was given to us through Jesus Christ. In order to trace that salvation that's given to us through Jesus Christ, you have to do what? You have to record it. You have to tell us about His life. Now, secondly, the rapid spread of the gospel precipitated the need for written accounts of the life of Christ. We needed written accounts for the life of Christ. Why? Why do we need written accounts for the life of Christ? For us, we've become accustomed to, and I've tried to bring up little shades and hints of this, but we have become accustomed to putting everything church-centric. So we've gotten to the point where everything is centered around the church. That is, while not a bad idea, it is a bit of an incorrect idea, because everything really centers around who? Christ, who is the head of the church. So what do you need more than anything? You need accounts of His life and teaching. That's why we need Gospels. 3, as major figures and His eyewitnesses died, there was a need for written accounts of what they had seen and heard. Why? Why? And then we would have been back to establishing the whole setting of Christianity as being built on what? Mysticism. Because what would have happened with the hearsay, Charlie? It would have grown and grown and grown and grown. So you would not have had the gospel, you would not have had the faith of the gospel, if you want to call it the Christian faith, you would not have had it based off of something that was literally black and white. You would have had it based off of mysticism. And we know that because mysticism developed in the first couple or 3 centuries. And how do I know it's mysticism? Because I've got what really happened. I've got what really happened, and it makes it pretty easy. Okay, number 4. These Gospels were used to evangelize, to teach new converts, and of course, were used in worship. They just became integral to us what? Yeah, to not just me knowing, but then fully, completely understanding. Okay, number 1 question, why did the Gospels need to be written? Number 2, why are there 4 of them? Why are there 4 of them? I just have that personality flaw, one among many that I'll admit, that if you want to have something, why do I have to have 4 of them? Why can't we just what? Why can't we just have 1 of them? Why do I need... Jenny was spraying for ants. We have 4 bottles in the cupboard. Why do I have to have 4 bottles? Why can't I just have 1? You see what I mean? Why do I need 4 gods? Why can't I just have 1? We're going to see why. We're going to see why. Given the statement that John 21:25 said, what did John 21:25 say? We'd run out of what? We'd run out of paper, and we'd run out of ink, and we'd run out of space. It actually is amazing that we don't have 100 of them. Okay? Secondly, did you realize that dozens of them exist? Did you realize that dozens of them exist? I mean, literally, I probably should have, but I didn't. I could have pulled up the Wikipedia list, and I could do it now, but it'd be a bunch of, and I don't want to do that. So I just stuck a few of them. This is just a few of them. If you look it up on Wikipedia, Gnostic Gospels, I think there's 60. I think there's 60 of them. There's a lot of them. A lot of them. If you think that 4 is a lot, look at the list, because the list is going to give you dozens and dozens and dozens. It wouldn't surprise me that there might be a number that would exceed 100 of them. So now, why is there 4 of them? Why don't we have 20 and then 23 other books? Why didn't we have 40? Why didn't we have 47 books? Why do we only have 4? These were the 4 that were what? Accepted as inspired, understood as inspired. A lot of these very, very spurious Gospels have a lot that is legendary. They look at it from very secular points of view, not a spiritual point of view. Let me give you an example real quick. There's a lot of contradictions in the Gnostic Gospels compared to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They picture Jesus as a child who threw temper tantrums, and if someone stole his toy, he would strike them dead. That doesn't sound like what? Some of them deny the virgin birth. Some of them depict Judas and Jesus colluding to plan the betrayal, in complete distinction to what we see in these 4 Gospels. So when I say the early church fathers, what do I mean by that? So basically the second generation of Christians, and these second generations of Christians were not inspired. I'm not claiming that they had any special supernatural ability. They didn't, but they were the people that were just one generation removed from essentially all of this history unfolding. And they wrote a lot. It's unbelievable how much they wrote, particularly when you think about what they had to write with and the mechanics of being able to just produce writings back then. It was extraordinary how much they wrote. They were unanimous in saying that all of these spurious gospels, all of these dozens of gospels were full of error. That they taught things that were completely against what actually happened in the life of Jesus. So, I had one time I'll call him a fan on YouTube, raise the question of the fact that, well, all he had was just the biased followers. Those are the ones that wrote about him. So I asked back in a comment, to which I didn't get a reply, who's the best person to write about Martin Luther King? Who's the best person to write about Martin Luther King? So tell me, who's the best person to write about Martin Luther King? One of his family, one of the people who was in his, I guess you would call it his ministry, but the ministry evolved into essentially the civil rights movement. So someone who was closely associated with him, or the final step, someone who is closely associated with one of the other 2, the first 2. Okay. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. What were Matthew and John? They were apostles. What about Mark and Luke? Mark was associated with, we're going to learn about this. Mark was associated with who? Mark was associated with who? Peter. Who was Luke associated with, Charlie? with Paul. Who are the best people to write about someone? The people who are closest to them, like a family member, who, by the way, wrote what, 2 books? Not in the Gospels. James and Jude. Or the people who were his followers, which is Matthew and John, or the people closely associated with them, which is Mark and Luke. It's the best people to write about. And everyone knows that. I can't see why this guy couldn't get it. It's the best people to write about it. But finally, one more. The Gospels were written to the 4 general groups of people in the first century. So, man, I'm running out of time. But I'm going to throw these up here really fast. I love this chart. So if you like charts, you need this one. Like to grab it, like with the picture. Here is the comparison of the 4 Gospels. And we'll start with this next week. But let's just see this, the comparison. Jesus Christ Jesus Christ in Matthew is viewed as a king, in Mark as a servant, in Luke as a man, in John as a God, because the Gospel of Matthew was written to the Jews, Mark was written to the Romans, Luke was written to the Greeks, John was written to everyone, and then when you have the one-word summary of them all, you have with Matthew, law, with Mark, power, with Luke, grace, and with John, glory. Now, there's a specific reason for every single one of those, and this is where we're going to start next week. I want you to see the message that each one of these Gospels present, because every one of them presents a different message, a different crowd, and a whole different understanding of every facet of the Lord's life. And then we'll start talking about each one of these Gospels individually.